Well, Tesla's numbers for Q4 2022 are just out, and it's a mixed bag. Plus, it's becoming more and more apparent that the US and the IRS are really trying to screw Tesla in the new Inflation Reduction Act $7,500 tax credit. Let's take a look. Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. So I was actually going to do a quick episode on the IRA Inflation Reduction Act $7,500 tax credit and how Tesla's being screwed by that. But literally as I was sitting down to record this video, the Tesla press release about their numbers came out. So I have just barely taken a look at it, so we'll get some sort of live reaction. But first, to the point of what I wanted to talk about, more details are coming out about that $7,500 tax credit and the reason why the Tesla Model Y does not qualify. Apparently, it doesn't qualify because it's 1.1 inches too short. And if I'm remembering correctly, 238 pounds or just about that, right around 238 pounds, too light to qualify as an SUV, even though the Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, classifies the Tesla Model Y as an SUV. And basically anywhere you look, it's in the SUV category. So it's clearly a crossover sport utility vehicle, but somehow magically, just by the tiniest of margins, this vehicle doesn't count. Meantime, a whole slew of hybrids with tiny little batteries and gas engines, which are really not very good for the environment because they're driving on gas engines. I know the gas mileage is better. They're effectively in the 40 mile per gallon range-ish, or, something along those lines. But, you're looking at Tesla with well over 100 miles per gallon equivalent, so much more efficient, fully electric, somehow magically just barely doesn't qualify. So what can Tesla do about this? There's a couple of things they can do. I made the joking thing saying that what they should do is bolt in some camp chairs or something. Obviously, there would be safety issues with that. So that's not a very realistic possibility. What is a more realistic option is for them to software limit the range. So let's say they did $54,999 for the Tesla Model Y, dual motor standard version that's in the United States. That's currently, I think, $66,000. So that's $11,000 off of the current sticker price, but that would allow it to qualify because it currently falls in the other category, which is only a $55,000 credit. But what they could do in consequence is software limit it to only, let's say 200 miles of range or something. And currently the range is around 328. I can't remember the exact number. It varies a little bit because every version of the Model Y changes that slightly, but it's in the 320s to 330 range, somewhere in that area. So by software limiting it to 200 miles, you would be reducing the range by well over a third. And that would make it, a less amenable car, but it would qualify in that case. And then what you can do is, in an aftermarket way, you'd have to get clever with financing and stuff, but essentially aftermarket, you could immediately sell and finance the extra range by paying something like $6,000 or $7,000 or $8,000 extra to get that range. And then of course you could also aftermarket purchase the full self-driving or whatever sort of enhanced navigate on autopilot you wanted. Now, the odds are that the Model Y is going to come down in price anyway because of the press release that just came out. We're going to see some demand issues potentially starting to crop up. But in general, the Model Y's price has been really, really elevated over the past year anyway due to high demand. And so Tesla has room to reduce the price. So what they could do is effectively reduce the price to, say, something like $63,000. Then they software limit it. So you get the dual motor standard version of it, not the performance version. That's just not really possible, I don't think, to bring down to that range. But anyway, you get that for just under $55,000. So it qualifies for the tax credit. And then you charge like $8,000 to get the range added back on. Or alternatively, you could pay a subscription price to have the range added back on again. That would be another possibility as opposed to purchasing it outright, which in a way might actually work better. If you paid $100 a month or something like that, you get the extra range. And there would be a group of people who would opt not to do that. If you were only using the car for city driving and you didn't really care about the extra range, there would be a group of people who would just take the $55,000 option, not upgrade. So Tesla would actually be losing out on sales. So there is a danger to them about doing something like this because they could actually lose out on some profits on the vehicle, but they would also get some take rate from people. You make it as sweet of a pot as possible to make it so that people would want to do the upgrade. And if it was a subscription basis, it basically just becomes part of the financing package for your vehicle. The other option, of course, would be to literally cut the price to $55,000, and Tesla could actually do that. They could make that happen. They have enough of a profit margin that would really substantially squeeze their profit margin, but it is a possibility. I don't think that's very likely. unlikely at all, but that is something that Tesla could do. Anyway, it is a really, really nasty situation. And this comes back to the fact that it seems like the current government that's in place right now is in bed with a lot of other automakers. If you look at Ford and Stellantis and GM, even though they don't have any cars that currently qualify because they're basically not making any EV cars right now. But if you look at those cars, most of them are hybrid vehicles, and those qualify even though they're hybrid vehicles. So you can see that Tesla's enmity with the current government that's in place has really, really caused some significant issues. In my previous video, which you can see up here, I thought it was bureaucratic idiocy that was driving this, but looking at what's going on right now, I'm starting to suspect more that this was actually an intentional thing. And if so, that's really egregious because it's the government pulling levers to try to make this as bad as possible for Tesla. And so I could also see them somehow magically failing to meet the battery requirements as well, because remember, that's another credit. I think it's $35 a kilowatt hour or something. There's some really, really large amount of money that they could save if they qualify for this. That is still yet to be determined, but I could also see them trying to screw Tesla in that case also. We'll just have to keep an eye on that space. One more quick aside, by the way, I had said in my previous video that you had to wait until your next year's filing to be able to get the tax break, right? So you get a tax credit of $7,500, assuming you purchased the qualifying car and all of that stuff. You get a $7,500 tax break, and I was saying you had to wait until you filed in like February or March of the next year to get that back. But apparently there's a form that you can fill out to reduce your withholding by, $7,500 divided by 12. Essentially, you reduce it by that amount throughout the year so you can actually start getting the money back immediately. So that's actually really cool to see. So anyway, I don't know the details about that. I'm certainly not a tax expert, but you should look into that if you do purchase a vehicle and it does qualify for the $7,500 tax credit. And don't forget that the 7-seater version of the Model Y, which I assume weighs just enough to qualify, must be an extra couple of £100 that those seats are or something like that. But anyway, that version does qualify. So if you want to fork out the extra $3,000 to get the 7-seat version and lose the storage space, which is the thing that's more annoying to me than anything else, you would then get the $7,500 tax credit. So that is a way that you can currently do it. I have a feeling that that option is going to suddenly be very popular, and you're going to see Tesla having to have delays on that particular version of the Model Y. So anyway, that's what I have to say about the current lay of the land in terms of the Tesla Model Y and its qualification as an SUV for the Inflation Reduction Act $7,500 tax credit. All right, so enough of that. Let's go to the press release. Tesla vehicle production and deliveries and date for financial results and webcast for fourth quarter 2022. So they're talking about the date that they're going to release that. The interesting stuff that we care about is the deliveries. And so to their credit, they get into this immediately. In the fourth quarter, we produced over 439,000 vehicles and delivered over 405,000 vehicles. The 439,000 vehicles is kind of expected. That's more or less in line. I think I've heard anything from 440 to the low 450s was what people were guessing. Again, I don't model this stuff out, so I'm taking this off of what other people have said, but this seems to be very much in line. But if you look at that 405,000 vehicles delivered, that actually is the part that's a little bit concerning because that's a substantial amount. That's 34,000 vehicles that were produced but not delivered. Now, I know that they're not stressing themselves out as much in terms of delivering every single vehicle, but you've got to remember they started this last quarter, so they already had, I think, somewhere around 40,000 vehicles in the pipeline, and they've actually added another 34,000 vehicles to that pipeline as well. And if you look at this next sentence, you can do the math and you can see that they actually have grown their inventory here. In 2022, vehicle deliveries grew 40% year over year to 1.31 million, while production grew 47% year over year to 1.37 million. So they grew production more than deliveries. Now, there is a little of that expectation because they were not pushing everything out immediately, but you can see that they've got something like 60,000 vehicles in inventory currently, right? 1.37 million minus 1.3 million gives you somewhere around 60,000 vehicles in inventory. So their inventory is actually expanding rather than contracting or staying stationary. And that is the part that's a little bit concerning because there's been a lot of news about demand not being as strong as it has been in China and the United States specifically. Now, they do have an excuse for this. We continue to transition to a more even regional mix of vehicle builds, which again led to a further increase in cars in transit at the end of the quarter. So what Tesla is saying here is that all of these cars have been sold. They're just on boats and on trains and on trucks and things like that being delivered to people. So if that's the truth, then what we should see is this number should start to stabilize. But again, from Q3 to Q4, we actually saw an increase in inventory. And that is a little bit concerning given the fact that there has been suggestions that demand has softened up significantly for Tesla. And finally, a big thank you to the customers, employees, suppliers, shareholders, and supporters who helped them achieve a great 2022, even with all of the crazy headwinds that went into that. So that's very much the truth. All right, so let's look at these tables. We have two of them. One of them is Q4, and the other one is all of 2022. So you can see with Model S and X, production was 20,613, while deliveries were 17,147. So that's reasonable. It's also kind of a drop in the bucket in terms of the number of sales and deliveries and things like that. The Model 3 and Y, of course, are where the big numbers are. Production was 419,088 and deliveries were only 388,131. So that's a significant drop. I mean, that is a big gap between the two of those. That's over 40,000 vehicles. And remember that they had some in the pipeline from the last quarter. So we're not looking at the start of this new way of doing logistics. We're looking at a continuation of this. And so, it's a little bit concerning that that number is that big. One would hope that that would have shrunk a little bit. And then of course, the total is 439,701 to 405,278. And then real quick, if you're interested in when they're going to do their Q4 financial report, that'll be after market close on Wednesday, January 25th. So keep an eye out for that. And then finally, let's look at 2022 production numbers and delivery numbers in total. You can see S and X production were 71,000 and change, while deliveries were 66,705. So you've got a difference of about 5,000 units or so, something like that, between production and deliveries. That number, again, seems fairly reasonable, but again, these numbers are a drop in the bucket compared to Model 3 and Y, which was production of 1.298 million and deliveries of 1.247 million. So you've got about 50,000 vehicles that are in inventory. Again, a lot of that is probably in transit and things like that, but it is a little bit of a concern. So we'll have to see if this number stabilizes in Q1 of 2023. And then of course, finally, we get the big ticket numbers. We get 1.369 million total production for the year and 1.313 total deliveries for the year. So again, this is a 47% year-over-year increase and a 40% year-over-year increase for deliveries. So those numbers are really good. They grew really well. Remember that there was an entire shutdown in Shanghai for a while. So they lost potentially up to 100,000 vehicles of production. So we could have been looking at 1.45 million with deliveries of maybe 1.4 million or something like that. So there was a substantial reduction, but also this is a reduction. A lot of people were predicting at the end of 2021, myself included, that they would be looking at more like 1.5 million vehicles produced rather than 1.4 million vehicles produced. So there is a big gap. And again, there were a lot of headwinds involved, but it's not as good a news, I think, as people were looking for. Of course, the stock market is closed today due to the holidays, but I expect we'll see some interesting reactions to this tomorrow morning as soon as the market opens. So I don't know what'll happen. I have a feeling this is a little bit less than a lot of people were expecting or hoping for. So I have a feeling that Tesla stock will go down tomorrow. Again, not a financial analyst by any means. This is just my own ramblings of a madman, as Tom Nash says. But anyway, I personally expect that Tesla stock will go down tomorrow because the delivery numbers in particular were not as good as people were hoping. So anyway, some of this looks like it's potentially bad news, but also, again, as Tesla says, a lot of this stuff is going into transit right now because of the mix of the way they're doing things. These numbers aren't as good as people were hoping for, but they're still really good. 40% year-over-year growth in the current environment with a recession coming on for Tesla deliveries specifically is really, really good numbers. That's not 50% like they're targeting, but it's still really, really good. And it sets them up, reasonably well for 2023, especially if they can start to pull some of the pricing levers and if they can figure out how in the world to get the Model Y to qualify for the US Inflation Reduction Act $7,500 tax credit by hook or by crook. I hope that they will be able to do that because I think that they're going to want to see that demand rise because in the US they've got Giga Austin coming online and really, really ramping up. So, they're going to want to be able to sell every one of the Model Ys in the US that they can. So I have a feeling they're going to have to start playing a game. Elon Musk yesterday said that it was messed up, quote unquote, that the IRA $7,500 tax credit was not going to the Model Y 5-seat variant. But anyway, if the government is going to play that way, then we'll have to see if Tesla can also play by those rules and come up with something clever to do. Probably something more clever than I thought of myself. But anyway, the obvious thing is the range limitation, and then charge a subscription or charge an extra fee for adding that range back in after the official sale. Anyway, as far as these numbers are concerned, I would be very interested to know what you all think, whether that matched your expectations. It was lower than my expectations. I was expecting about 1.4 million production and about 1.35 million deliveries. So, it's about on the order of 40 or 50,000 units less than I expected for both of those. So anyway, I'll be very curious to know what you all think about that. Definitely let me know in the comments. In the meantime, if you enjoyed this video and found it fun and thought-provoking, please do like it so other people can find it. And of course, consider subscribing to this channel. We're getting really close to 50,000. I would love to hit that soon. It would be great. And I'm going to do something interesting when we hit 50,000. I don't know if it's going to be a giveaway or something else, but I'm going to come up with something. So anyway, if you want to potentially get something or watch me do something silly, then definitely subscribe so that we can get to 50,000 soon. As always, a huge shout out to my patrons on Patreon. Thank you all so much. Again, 2022 was great, and I'm looking forward to 2023 even more. And of course, if you want to join the team, just check out the link in the description. And if you're interested in a whole bunch of really cool merch, check out our merch store. Link is in the description. We have TeslaBot t-shirts, the Tesla meme t-shirt, Success is a Possible Outcome, 4680 battery cells. All of that stuff is on t-shirts, mugs, tumblers, and on. So check it out. And for those of you interested in investing, check out WeBull, an amazing platform for buying and selling stocks, and now cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, Dogecoin, and others. Open an account and get a free stock valued at up to $200, and fund your account and get another free stock valued at up to $1,600. Check out the link in the description and help the channel at the same time. Thank you. And finally, don't forget we are both Tesla and Amazon affiliates. If you look in the description, you can see how going shopping for a solar roof, a Powerwall, or anything on Amazon helps out the channel. In the meantime, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.